and welcome back to HR Celebrity. This is episode number 3. I'm so excited about this. Guys, thank you very much to everybody who's been supporting us. Oopsie daisy, I've got sound going on in the background. Everybody who's been supporting us, thank you very much. The point of this show, for those of you who didn't know, was to showcase HR at a time where HR has become one of the most relevant professions in our businesses. People management is crucial at this time in that, you know, during a pandemic, during work from home, during lockdown, during all these difficult times and unique circumstances that we find ourselves in, working HR has become a completely vital part, and we wanted to start up this channel really just to showcase HR and showcase various people and organizations that are innovating, doing something different, or just educating us in terms of various HR techniques, methodologies, etc. So today we've got a fantastic lineup. We've got Sean Bowes, the owner of Silverswan HR Consultancy, and he's going to be talking about labor relations in terms of the Disciplinary code, as well as Tilly Govendor, the owner of Mindwiz, and she is going to be talking about, are we putting our personal growth on the back burner? And I think at a time when we've had some time to reflect, usually we get caught up in the day-to-day and the rat race as such. You know, now we're at home, or we've been at home for the last 2 months. Obviously, we're going into lockdown 3, which I think will open up a lot of industry. But I think over the last 2 months, we've certainly had some time to think about, you know, are we putting our personal growth on the back burner, or are we developing ourselves, or are we using this time to develop ourselves? So that's definitely at the forefront of my mind, and I think it's going to be a very useful conversation. One more thing is, please subscribe to the channel so that you can be notified. Add in the notification button so that you can hear about any upcoming events. We have got a show happening every Thursday at 3 o'clock. Next week we've got an awesome lineup as well, so please get in touch and stay in tune. And guys, otherwise let's get right into it. Let's get Sean on the line. I'm going to dial him in right now as we speak, and let's get into it in terms of labor relations, in terms of the disciplinary code and the procedure. So let's get him on the line. Hello Sean, how's it going?
Hey Brian, fine, and you?
Let's just try that again.
Can you see me?
There we go. I can see you now. Hi, Sean. Sean, if you could just raise your screen a little bit. We sort of got your chin out of the picture. Very difficult to see you. Just There we go. Perfect. Sean, thank you very much for joining us on HR Celebrity. It's wonderful having you here. Before we begin, maybe just tell us a little bit about Silverswan Consulting. Just let us know what it is that you do, what you're about, before we get into the topic.
Thanks, Brian. My name is Sean Bowes. I'm the founder of Silverswan HR Consulting. And a brief background of myself is I have more than 36 years of generalist HR experience at senior management level in both public and private sectors. And I'm registered at the South African Board for People Practices as a chartered HR professional. But more about Silverswan HR Consulting, our philosophy is that we believe that HR has the potential to make or break a business and is fundamental to developing a positive business culture and enhancing employee engagement and productivity.
We agree 100% with you, Sean.
Thank you. And the services we offer at Silverswan HR Consulting, it's a comprehensive range of nationwide HR consulting services, including talent management, labor relations, employee relations, disciplinary hearings, CCMA, bargaining council representation, employment equity, skills development, and equal opportunity awareness training, amongst a host of others. Okay. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what HR our consulting services are about.
Fantastic. So if anybody wants to reach Sean, his email address is in the description below in terms of labor, well, all of the services that you've just mentioned. So yeah, they can contact you in the email in the description below. Sean, so let's jump right in. Labor relations in terms of the disciplinary code and procedure. What is the disciplinary code and procedure?
Well, yeah, labor relations in terms of the disciplinary code. I want to talk about the disciplinary code and procedure, but also want to go a bit deeper into that later, how to manage misconduct versus incapacity.
I suppose now is a time where, with people working remotely and not really having that eye on people as we would in the past, I suppose it's become more crucial than ever to be able to understand the processes and procedures that are required to handle staff from a remote source.
Exactly. And I'll cover that. But to answer your first question is what is a disciplinary code and procedure? And basically, it is a procedure for handling matters relating to misconduct and incapacity in the company or the organization. And it recommends sanctions for employees found guilty of offences before taking mitigating and aggravating factors into account. The disciplinary code is also a set of standardized forms to ensure a consistent approach in the company. It's a set of guidelines to ensure that we maintain procedural as well as substantive fairness, and I'll cover that later. It provides guidelines to assist the various parties involved in the process to perform their roles in an effective manner, because each one has different roles. And then there's also a document that forms part of the conditions of service of all employees.
Okay, so going into then substantive fairness, as well as what is procedural substantive fairness?
Okay, there's a difference between the two, and they're both very important. Now, procedural fairness means that an employer has followed a fair and proper procedure before dismissing the employee, even if the dismissal is substantively unfair. So it refers to a disciplinary inquiry that has to be held to give the employees the opportunity to state his or her defense.
What would an example of that be, Sean? Like, let's say we've got a non-performing sales representative. Would you be able to give us an example on sort of what would be a fair procedure, but in a high level, not going into too much detail? I know you can.
Well, procedural fairness is you can deal with it in terms of misconduct and in terms of incapacity, but basically the procedure, you got to show that there's a fair procedure. Now the procedure, according to the Labour Relations Act, if you talk about misconduct first of all, procedural fairness, there's certain requirements in terms of the Labour Relations Act 66 of 1995 is amended, and there an employer must inform the employee of allegations in a manner that the employee can understand. That includes remote workers, so you've got to let your remote workers know of the allegations in a manner that can understand. Then the employee should be allowed reasonable time to prepare a response to the allegations as well. Now, obviously, if the employee has responded and there's no case or no charge, then close the case and just inform the employee. However, once the employee has stated their side of the story and has responded, only then can a charge be compiled. As now we have both sides of the story, and if the case is serious enough to warrant a disciplinary hearing, generally for dismissals or for final written warnings, you have a disciplinary hearing. Then you've got to notify all the relevant parties of the date, the time, and the venue of the hearing. And under our current lockdown situation regulations, we may still have to hold hearings remotely. Now, also, the employee must be given an opportunity to state his or her case during the proceedings or during the hearing, and the employee has a right to be assisted by a shop steward or another employee during the proceedings, and has a right to be present at the hearing, including remote workers. via Skype or Zoom or whatever platform we use.
It's definitely an interesting time for us in terms of this type of engagement with staff. And does that include substantive fairness? We touched on that.
Yeah, that is basically the procedure. Now, substantive fairness. Now we dealt with misconduct, but substantive fairness, if you look at misconduct, and substantive fairness is to justify dismissal. You've got to have a valid reason to dismiss somebody. So it must be a fair or valid reason for the employer to dismiss an employee. If the employee is dismissed and the reason is automatically unfair, the employer may be ordered to reinstate the employee to his or her position. So substantive fairness deals basically with the reasons for the dismissal. So in order for dismissal to be fair, there must be valid reasons for such conduct by an employee. In other words, or example, it could have been theft or fraud. Is that a valid reason? In other words, does the sanction or the punishment suit the crime? And that's basically what substantive fairness is about.
And I suppose that lends itself straight into then what is misconduct versus incapacity. Maybe you want to touch on that. What is the difference between misconduct and? I mean, I think we can maybe think it's obvious, but I somehow think that it's not.
Yeah, it seems obvious, but there is a difference, and there's difference in procedures as well. So if you look at misconduct, that refers to the employee's behavior or the employee's conduct. And misconduct is basically a disregard to the company rules. In other words, a rule has been broken in the company. And it is generally the fault of the employee, whether negligently or intentionally. And misconduct is rectified through a series of warnings, depending on the severity of the nature of the misconduct. And it can lead to the dismissal of an employee. But what is important is poor performance is generally seen as incapacity. But it can be considered misconduct if the employee has previously demonstrated the ability to perform to the correct standard. So that basically covers misconduct. I don't know should I go straight into incapacity to see the difference?
Yes. Let's go straight in.
Okay, so incapacity refers to the inability of an employee to perform his or her duties, and it can be a result of poor performance, ill health, or ability. But mainly because of time constraints, I want to deal mainly with incapacity as poor performance, and just look at poor performance. And incapacity is not intentional or necessarily the fault of the employee. That's the difference to misconduct, but is an implied condition of the employment contract. In other words, it's implied that you are able to perform your work at a certain level in your contract. And then incapacity is rectified by a series of counselling sessions, whereas misconduct was rectified by a series of warning letters, perhaps. And then incapacity can also lead to the dismissal or termination of the contract. And as I mentioned, incapacity due to poor work performance, where the employee has previously demonstrated the ability to perform at the correct level, should be handled as misconduct, as this poor performance is then intentional and seems to be the fault of the employee. So that basically is the difference between misconduct and incapacity.
And how would you go about managing both? From going into pandemic, going into working from home, maybe looking at incapacity being the subject matter, given fear, underlying illnesses, viruses, etc. How would you go about managing that process?
Well, we basically touched the process of managing misconduct procedurally. Now, incapacity, you can manage incapacity remotely. And let me touch on that first. You can manage it remotely. It would be quite difficult, though, because how do you evaluate a person that has to fix a machine? on site and they're sitting at home. You cannot evaluate that. Some instances you can, for most jobs you can really manage it remotely, but it could be difficult in some instances. But if we talk about poor performance in terms of procedural fairness, the employee should not be dismissed for an unsatisfactory performance unless the employer has, and there are certain requirements to follow, the employer has given the employee appropriate evaluation, instruction, training, guidance, or counseling, and given the chance for improvement for a reasonable period of time. So if the employee continues to perform in an unsatisfactory manner, then they can take it further. That's why I said it can be quite challenging to do it remotely, because how do you evaluate them if they can do it or not? Specifically, the example I used, fixing a machine. But in most other jobs you could. So the employee should set up counseling sessions with the employee to find out the reasons why they're not performing, and give a reasonable time before you hold another counseling session.
Sean, what would be I might be throwing you a curveball here, but what would be a reasonable time to give an employee to improve?
A very good question. It depends on the nature of the job. If I can start with a cleaner, the cleaner's job may be to sweep the floor. So a reasonable time to teach him to sweep the floor properly or to evaluate them could be a day. Whereas a more complicated job could be a week, could be a month, it could be 2 months. It depends on the nature of the job. So what is reasonable between the employer and the employee, and they will sit around a table during the counseling session and decide together what a reasonable time would be for evaluation, if they've improved or if they haven't improved.
Perfect.
But if we can continue on that, so there'll be counselling sessions held, and more than one perhaps. There could be a second or a third counselling session, and if they reach the set standard that was agreed between the employer and the employee. If they are performing or they've reached the set standard and both parties are happy with it, then close the case. However, if they're still not performing after the counselling sessions, then it's unfortunate, but they would have to go into a formal incapacity hearing.
And what would the procedure of that typically follow? On a high level.
Well, again, you would have to, as an employer, you'd have to inform the employee the date, venue, and time of the hearing, all the parties that have to attend, and go through, give the employee the opportunity to state their case and answer questions, and it's just like a normal hearing. And then obviously the outcome of the hearing must be in writing and must be given to the employee as well.
Perfect, Sean. That's been very informative. That's all we have time for today, unfortunately. But if anybody wants to get hold of you, again, your email is in the description below for any kind of labor related. I think your scope was so large in terms of HR, people handling, disciplinaries. It just went on and on and on. So if anybody wants to get hold of you, they can get in touch with you on your email address directly. And I hope that some really get to use your services from this. Obviously, with 35 years experience, you know your stuff.
Thank you, Brian. If I may just add, if they could also look at the website at www.silverswan.co.za, there's more information there. We couldn't cover it in this short period, but there's more information there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Take care.
That was Sean Bose from Silverswan. Sean, thanks again very much. Next up, we have got Tilly Govendor. Tilly, he's still on the line. Tilly Govendor is the owner of Mindwiz, and she is going to be talking to us about putting your professional development or personal growth on the back burner. As I mentioned before, this has been such a reflective time in terms of, you know, we really had a lot of time to think about ourselves and think about where we're going and our futures. Looking at masterclasses and coaching has become such a big part of professional careers. And Tilly's going to chat to us a little bit about that. Let me get her on the line. Just dial her in here. I'll hear my music playing in the background. Hopefully she's available. Hi, Tilly. Tilly, we can't see you at the moment. Tilly, we can't see you. I've got you on the call, but I can't see you or hear you. Tilly, are you with me, Tilly? I'm going to try call back. Sorry about that, guys. Let's try and get Tilly back on the line. Let's try and get hold of her. Let's see if we can get Tilly again talking about, are you putting your personal growth on the back burner? Which I think will be fantastic. Let's see if we can get her on the line. Tilly, hi. There we go. We've got Tilly on the line. Let me just put you through. Hi, Tilly. How's it going?
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Good afternoon to your viewers.
Fantastic. Tilly, before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Mindwiz.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm truly delighted to be here.
Fantastic to have you.
Yes, thank you. Mindwiz Trading Academy is a training company which I currently own. It focuses primarily on personal, team, and leadership development. So the question is, what do I do? Brian, I'm a professional trainer, speaker, mentor, and coach. Just to give you some background and information about myself, I started off as a high school teacher, and thereafter I pursued a legal, financial, and a training career in the corporate world for over 18 years. My last role, Brian, was with a financial institution as a development partner in the leadership and learning division. So Brian, out of all the career journeys that I've been through, I finally get to follow my passion and my purpose in life, and that is to grow people and unleash their true potential.
Fantastic. I mean, I said earlier on in the show, I think we've all had a reflective time, and I think we're all kind of excited about it. But from your side, what do you think the relevance of a topic like putting your personal growth on the back burner is at a time like this?
Yeah, no, very good question, Brian. I personally believe that we are certainly in crucial and unprecedented times. To me, this whole lockdown and this pandemic, it actually seems surreal. It's like it's not true. But yet at the same time, it's a godsend. I believe that God has pressed the pause button on the whole wide world. And he's given us the opportunity to actually go deep within and do some very serious self-introspection. And Brian, this is what we so desperately needed right now. And that is to take stock of our lives and, ask ourselves where we are, recalibrate, realign our goals, re-engineer ourselves. And that's what's so interesting about these times. We just cannot afford to put our personal growth on the back burner. Because if we're not growing, Brian, we're dying, isn't it so?
I agree 100%. 100% I agree.
Yes. So, I mean, the thing is that we need to be agile and nimble. And if we are not agile and nimble and really invest in our own personal growth, then we're really truly going to get left behind. But interestingly enough, Brian, what I find, with people right now is that they operate out of two premises, right? They're either operating out of fear and anxiety on the one hand, right?
Yeah.
Or growth and creativity on the other hand. So we all know which is the empowering one and which is the disempowering one.
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of times like this. We usually, as you pointed out, this is such a time of introspection. Usually we're running in the rat race and we're in that wheel and we're just going and going and going, and it's just a matter of that I would class as the fear. We need that income at the end of the month, and we're just in a constant state of fear. And I've got to do my job. I got to keep my job. But a time like the pandemic has really afforded us an opportunity to say, well, what do I want? What do I want? What are my goals? What are my aspirations? So I agree with you 100%. We have to have goals. And, you've often spoken about growth gap traps. What exactly is a growth gap trap?
Oh, no, that's a very good question. We all know that in order for us to achieve our dreams, goals, and aspirations, as you mentioned, Brian, we need to grow, right?
Yes.
So, unfortunately, what we tend to do is that we allow our growth gap trap. That's a terminology that I'd like for people to stick in their minds, because it's the trap, the growth gap trap. It actually sabotages our growth, and it robs us of our dreams, goals, and aspirations. Now, what is exactly a growth gap trap? That's your question. It is a mistaken belief that a person has that prevents him or her from actually growing, from attaining their true potential. But
let's just jump on that for a second there. What is a mistaken belief? Maybe you have a couple of examples of these mistaken beliefs. I think the viewers would want to let's just unpack that for a second.
Yes, thanks, Brian. Definitely. So to give you an example of a few, there are actually 8 in total. I think it's important for the viewers and everyone to actually maybe, as I'm going through them, to ask themselves, is this relevant to them? Does it apply to them? So, as I said, let's just repeat, what is a growth gap trap? It's a mistaken belief, okay? And so these are not necessarily true, right? It sits in our, we're probably not even conscious of it. And it sometimes even sits in our subconscious, and it really affects and influences our behavior. And that actually holds us back. The first one, Brian, is the assumption gap trap, or assumption gap, we call it. And this is when a person actually assumes that they will grow automatically. Now, where did this belief come from? Now, just to explain that in detail, remember when we were children, right? Our bodies grew automatically, right? Every year you got stronger, you got taller, you were able to do new and challenging things. But unfortunately, what has happened is that people have taken the same mindset into adulthood.
I suppose the systems and structure of school forced that mentality as well, where you went from grade 1 to grade 2, grade 3, and you were constantly learning for about 20 odd years, varsity included, and then all of a sudden there's nothing forcing you along your next path. Is that maybe where the assumption? Would you agree?
Absolutely. That is exactly what I'm trying to say. That when we achieve adulthood, we are taking the same mindset, right? And we believe that mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, that we're going to follow the same pattern. But you and I know, Brian, that is not true. That is absurd. If we are not intentional about our growth, growth just doesn't happen, right? Remember, it's not by accident that growth comes by. We need to be intentional about it. Talking about the school, yes. Remember when we were done with our formal education? I think what we must realize is that we must take responsibility and ownership of our own growth process. And that's where, the reality will kick in. The penny drops that if we do not invest in our own growth, and we are actually responsible for that. Because if we don't take care of ourselves and our growing, who else will?
Okay. And what you said there were 8 examples?
Yes. Sorry, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Cool. Yeah. The second one is a knowledge gap trap. And this is when someone tells himself or herself, I don't know how to grow. So it becomes a good excuse not to grow, right? The third one is a timing gap. This is when a person tells himself or herself, it's not the right time to begin. They come up with excuses. It's about timing, and they procrastinate and postpone and never get down to it. The fourth one is a mistake gap trap. And I think lots of people will identify with that, and then they're just afraid of making a mistake. They're afraid of failure.
I think we often see that in sort of older generation, my parents, in that when it comes to computers, I'm afraid I'm going to blow it up, or I'm afraid I'm going to. We see it quite a lot in terms of, or at least I have. I mean, I've personally experienced my father, my mother, sort of being very sort of wary of what button to push, or and I think there's a certain element of that comes out of a schooling regime as well, which said you do something when you're told to do it. You take orders. Where the world has evolved, I mean, it's changed. You can't sort of follow instructions anymore to that extent, because then you won't be evolving with an ever-changing or dynamic workplace in a dynamic world that requires evolution to happen. Am I kind of following?
Absolutely, Brian. Absolutely, hit the nail on the head. We all know about the mistake. Mistake. We all do that, and we're afraid of it. The fifth one, Brian, is the perfection gap. This is when someone actually says to himself or herself, I have to find the best way to start. I have to find the best way before I start. And hence they procrastinate and put off actually any action in their life. As I mentioned, the sixth one is the inspiration gap. The inspiration gap is when an individual says, I just don't feel like doing it. How often does it happen? I just don't feel like.
I think now is a key sort of example of that. Actually, what I found anyway from the lockdown was there was this kind of apathy that set in to a lot of people. So there was this kind of surge in day 1 and 2 of we need to train ourselves and we need to start a new project and we need to build something or whatever. And then day 3, 4, 5 came along, and there was suddenly this apathy that just kind of hit everybody, this kind of sense of, but what's the point? And I'm not sure if it necessarily is in line exactly with the inspiration gap trap, because I think it might have been a bit circumstantial, but it's certainly, there is, many people suffer from that, which is just pure apathy. It's, I don't really want to, it's not maybe it's a lack of inspiration, maybe it's just a pure laziness, or it is a lack of inspiration, which is then fostering a laziness.
Absolutely. And we justify that. Remember, our mind is the biggest trickster. So it will tell us all things to prevent us from doing what we ought to do. And I think that's the trick to the whole thing, is to understand that these are mistaken beliefs. And they sit somewhere in our subconscious that we actually learned, during the course of our lives. So the next one is a comparison gap. Let's say, for instance, when a person says that others are better than I am, how often that has happened? I mean, how is it possible for you to know that someone else is better than you, unless you don't try? The person may look confident and and may just intimidate you, but you may just be 100% for the job. So I think these are the things that, people need to realize, that these are mistaken beliefs, and they need to search their thought processes and ask themselves, is it really, am I guilty of it? Because really it's a disempowering belief. It's mistaken. It's holding us back. And the last one, Brian, is an expectation gap. That is when a person says, "Oh, I thought it would be easier than this," and they just give up, or it's too difficult, and they come up with a whole lot of excuses.
I had that with the show. To be honest, I thought it would be a lot easier to run than it is. But anyway, that's my story.
I need to commend you because, you did something, I had a chat with you prior, and you mentioned that implementation is an issue, but the fact that you did now, for me, it's like, hey, you're on the job.
But let's go back into which of these traps do you think have held you back personally? If I can ask that question.
Sure, Brian. I think I've had 3 of them. My entire lifetime, I think I'm most guilty of the perfection gap trap because, it's like everything has to be, I have to find the best way before I start something. And hence you would find that, I've been through so many different roles, 10 different roles in my entire career to finally find out where I want to be and what I want to do. And incidentally, Brian, it just didn't happen, I actually needed help. I only became aware of these mistaken beliefs by enlisting, the help of a coach. I am a certified coach myself. I've got a whole host of degrees that accompany it, but yet I believe that everyone needs a coach.
I think I mentioned to you as well in some of our pre-conversations, I've had a coach and I've had phenomenal transformation in my own life with the help and guidance of a coach. So I strongly back coaching as well. I've had a great personal experience with a coach. I've had career growth. I've had personal growth. I've had a clarity of mind through coaching. So I really do back the process, and I strongly advise anybody who is questioning their future to take the advice of a coach and understand. Maybe I'm jumping in a little bit on your side here, but to understand that a coach is not there to tell you what to do, but to rather guide you through a process that will lead you down your own path. And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's what my coach did for me. So I'm a very big believer in the coaching process.
No, thanks, Brian. A lot of people mistaken, they use the word coach and mentorship or mentor interchangeably. They're 2 separate functions. And a coach is, I think actually the role of a coach is just phenomenal. It's like someone holding your hand and allowing you to achieve your dreams and accelerate the path to your dreams without telling you what to do, actually, but actually realizing things. You get to realize things and you get to your journey faster and quicker. And there's a whole lot of clarity. Whereas a mentor would actually share, experiences, etc., with an individual. So, I'm a certified coach and mentor and teacher and trainer and speaker. So I'm able to sort of, fit in any role when I see a client. And that's the advantage, of being multi-skilled.
Tilly, what advice would you give to our viewers in terms of overcoming these gap traps?
Oh yes, thank you for the question. That's what we need to tell the viewers. How do we overcome this if this is the problem? So firstly, Brian, I would actually just implore everybody to be aware of these mistaken beliefs and ask yourself which of these mistaken beliefs, right, apply to them personally. Okay, then what you need to do is, okay, if we find that that's there, we need to actually weed them out and replace them with more enabling beliefs. And that's what we need to do. Secondly, I would advise everyone to ask the big questions, right? And what are the big questions? Where are you at the moment, right? Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? and what direction you want to go. And also ask yourself, what is the furthest that I foresee or imagine myself going? Now, these are the big questions that we need to ask ourselves to actually just to understand.
Would you advise people to write those questions down, or are they constantly evolving? Is it a thought process, or is there a literal goal set? Would you write them down?
Well, obviously in any order, but I would start off with, where am I? Your current state. So where are you? And is this where you want to be? Sometimes people have landed up in a situation just purely through circumstances. You know that. Somebody offered them a job and they ended up there, and that was not necessarily what their goals and dreams and aspiration is. And then, the organization has taken you to a path, and you are in a situation, and you would find most people actually finding themselves being frustrated, and it's because they really haven't understood who they are, where they are at the moment, where they want to go, and how they want to go there. And I would definitely, if people want to write the questions down, the ones that I mentioned, they're most welcome to do so. So it's very important to first take cognizance of where you are, ask yourself, and sometimes you just got to realign yourself or reposition yourself, and that's exactly why we use time to do it.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's never too late to change. Sometimes we do. You're absolutely right. We get stuck in a sort of not stuck in a rut of a company, but put in a pathway within a business where we will go from job to job to job, sort of growing in that organization, and then sort of taking cognizance. Because I think when you are young, your first objective is just a salary. Many of us, we've all been there, where we go and we say, okay, cool, I need to get a job. Why? Because I need a salary. That's the bottom line. There's no other preconceived idea of who or what we want to be. It's, I want to be wealthier than I am today. So inevitably, I think what happens to a lot of people is you take that first job and you go from the first job and you get promoted, and then you get promoted, and then you find yourself in a career. For me, what I find is it only happens a little bit later in life once you've sort of found stability, because in between all of that, you're having kids and you buying a house, and you kind of forgetting about you in many cases. It's always about the next thing. And then at some point you kind of go, but what happened to my dream? What happened to my, my goals that I had? And I do think it's worth just acknowledging that it isn't too late to change, even if you're far on in a career.
And also, it's not too late to start, even if you're young. So the trick is to run it parallel. So if you have if you've got a job to do, and you've got bills to pay, and you've got all of these, societal pressures that are on you to be this and do this, you have to also, invest in you, because at some point in time you're going to have those two meet. That's what the whole idea is, and you have to start now. So if the moment you finish your formal education, remember, we are left on our own. And the third thing that I would like to advise people, Brian, on is that we need to actually face the fear factor. I mean, we all know, it's best to jump in afraid. Ask me that. And, and that's always, we want to actually just move out of our comfort zone. Sometimes I need to be kicked and pushed and whatever. And sometimes I welcome my friends and I ask them, hold me accountable to all of these things, because sometimes you just can't do it on your own. But sometimes you have to just jump in afraid. They say, what do they say? You jump in, right? Just jump and build your wings on the way. So, yes, and that's the only way to do it. Fourthly, I would like to tell everyone, be responsible for your own growth, right? It's senseless, I think you also mentioned, waiting for your employer or some third party, right, to invest in your growth. Because what has happened, and I think you're also cognizant of this, and you actually made me aware of this, Brian, is that sometimes the organizations have their own goals and aspirations, right? And if you are waiting for them to invest in you, they're going to invest in skills that they want you and they need you for. And which is not necessarily what you would like to build, and it doesn't really coincide and align with your own goals and aspirations, where you see yourself, the end goal. And fifthly, I would like to say, change from an accidental growth mindset to an intentional growth mindset.
So,
yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, Brian.
I was going to say, touching on accidental growth mindset to an intentional growth mindset, how exactly would you move from an accidental growth mindset to an intentional one? What would be that process?
Okay, because remember I said we just went through that. We said we need to be aware of it and we need to cut it and, we need to replace it with enabling one. But I'll answer your question by giving you examples of a person with an accidental growth mindset and a person with an intentional one. So let's look at the accidental growth. If somebody has an accidental growth mindset, let's say for instance they say, I plan to start tomorrow. Whereas an intentional growth mindset would say, I insist on starting today. It's just a decision. And people can do it right now. They can make that switch.
Sounds like me and my weight loss.
Yes, you can do something right now. It's like, and it's just as you mentioned, small little bits, bit by bit, we get there. It's all about taking action. Another example, like an accidental growth mindset person will wait for growth to come to them. They wait for the employer to put them on a course or someone to sponsor them. And whereas the person with an intentional growth takes responsibility for his or her own growth, right? And maybe the last example I would use in terms of an accidental growth mindset is when someone feels that they learned from their mistakes. That's quite common, right? But an intentional growth mindset would say often learns before mistakes. And that's where we need to position ourselves. Okay? So we all need to adopt a very, very intentional growth mindset.
So it's essentially proactivity within ourselves.
Correct.
Cool, Tilly. That's pretty much all the time we have. I think, sure, it's been a really informative chat. Is there anything that you'd like to close off with specifically?
Okay, I would love to encourage everyone to do the following. Please have a personal growth plan, and most importantly, implement it. Right? If you don't know how, get help. I'd also like to implore everybody to just make sure that they do something, do something, whatever you need to improve, whether to upskill, to cross-skill, to reskill, to learn a new skill. It's an investment in yourself, and it's going to be the best decision you ever make. And most importantly, do it now. The word later, Brian, is just a dream killer.
Later's a dream killer. I think that's probably what we can keep stuck in our minds. Later is a dream killer.
Later is a dream killer. Do it now. Just shut this down and do it now.
Cool, Tilly. That's awesome. I mean, thank you very much. Before we end off with Tilly, though, I believe you are offering our viewers something for free. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, I just thought, how do I give back? And, as I said, I'm following my passion, and people actually, it's about growing. So I will be running a free virtual masterclass on the invaluable laws of growth. It's actually written by John Maxwell. I'm actually a John Maxwell team member as well. So in the month of June, I will be running those free virtual masterclasses. I would love to implore people to get like-minded people together, and it's an ideal opportunity to start implementing your growth plan. It's a start, and it's. I'd like. I'm not sure whether you want to maybe put my email address.
Your email address is in the description below. So anybody who wants to contact Tilly from Mindwiz, they can get a hold of you directly on your email address, which is already in the description below.
Correct. It's Tilly.inspired@gmail.com. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing everyone. And just remember, be kind to yourself.
Awesome. Tilly, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on the show today and being part of it. I think everybody who's watched and listened to you has definitely learned something and has taken something away from this. If nothing else, it's do it now, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian, and thank you so much for the opportunity, and congratulations on an initiative well done.
Thank you very much, Tilly. Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers, bye.
Guys, thank you very much to Tilly Govendor from Mindwiz. Tilly, thanks a lot. It was really great having you on the show. And guys, if anybody wants to get hold of Tilly, like I mentioned, her email address is in the comments or in the description below. Guys, this is something that we're doing every week on a Thursday at 3 o'clock, hopefully to showcase HR businesses, HR professionals, and our industry generally. So please subscribe. We really appreciate if you subscribe, because that way you can get notified and hopefully gain some knowledge and learn. What you may have picked up is this is not another sales pitch. We are not trying to sell anything on this show. We are literally just trying to give an opportunity to businesses and to professionals to share some knowledge and for our community to grow. We're trying to grow this channel and grow the community as a whole. And obviously, in a time of the pandemic, it's vital to acknowledge that that people are first and foremost the biggest and most important part of our business, and HR has the duty of looking after those people. So guys, please subscribe, please join next week when we have another 2 guests, and thank you very much to everybody who's joined and has watched so far. Thanks so much, and